Hey. Hello, everybody. Nice to see all of you once again. Welcome to the final session of the ICP Chain Fusion Educate series. Today we have a very special speaker from Motoko Bootcamp with us, Seb, and he will be telling you something about creating multi-chain DAOs with the internet computer. I don't want to dwell on this too much longer, so I'll just give you over to Seb, who will be holding the session. So Seb, feel free to share your screen, and you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and Seb will get to them in due course. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me good?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. Yeah, welcome everyone. Happy to be here. I can see in the chat a few familiar names already. So let's go for this presentation. Okay, so we are here today to talk about DAOs, and I want to first ask a question to the audience. Not a lot of people know it when they first encounter ICP, because ICP is presented as a blockchain, as a cloud. But it's also actually a DAO. So ICP is a DAO, or at least a DAO governed network. And that's why I chose this topic of multi-chain DAOs. I believe DAOs are fundamental to what ICP is, and if ICP will succeed or not depends on this concept of decentralized autonomous organization. And so, yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about it. In the first part of this presentation, I will explain why I believe DAOs are the next evolution of the workspace and how we interact with other people. And in the second part, we will go into this multi-chain aspect and why ICP is a great place to actually start and build an infrastructure for a multi-chain DAO. And we will see like a few examples of things that can be done on ICP. Okay, so before we go into the presentation, I just want to talk about Motoko Bootcamp. So this is a program that I started and that I'm running. It's a 7-day adventure where you can essentially learn Motoko, which is a programming language to build on ICP. And also you get to meet the ICP community, you get to learn about different projects and what are the opportunities in the ecosystem. And also I recently started another event, which is a hackathon, collaborative hackathon called Open Internet Summer. Actually, it starts on Saturday, and we are bringing together builders, ideas, and resources to create a collaborative environment to build together on ICP. So ICP, for me, and that's my big thesis, is a decentralized workspace. I believe that right now we are in a period, transitory period, where we have the financial layer that has been built, mainly with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all other DeFi applications that are out there. And this new economy is not being put to use. It's mainly remain, I would say, dormant. So we have a lot of protocols that reach high valuation. We have people making money and changing their life. That's really impressive. And in such a short time frame, how many things have changed is impressive. But we are still using traditional organization to work. So if you look at the startups in the crypto ecosystem, even Definity, even the foundations, usually the builders, all the bigger projects have a startup behind, and that's how they organize. And so this is what I call traditional organization, traditional organizational structure. And I think it locked the potential of Web3. The potential of Web3 is much bigger than we can see right now. It can potentially expand to all sorts of industries. But for that, we need to prove that non-traditional organization, which I call DAO, can be more efficient. Why do I believe that? So I believe that this transition will happen in the next few years, because right now we have been living in a world that is, I would say, corporate dominated. So you have on one side you have this corporate model where it's about scaling, it's about accumulating and specialization, and that has a lot of advantages, especially in the world that we were living in for the past decades. For example, scale enables you to reduce the costs. Accumulation makes it easier to actually engage in buying properties, buying lands, and specialization of your task force, like having people specialize in specific subdomains inside the group of your company, makes, of course, the whole system more efficient. But I believe with new technologies, we are moving to a community-empowered world where it's more about flexibility. So flexibility for the individuals, which means you can actually do many things. You don't necessarily have a single role and a single job. You can actually combine different income streams. Diversity also in terms of the domains and passion that you can explore. And holistic, it's a world that means that it takes into account all aspects of life. So right now, the organization that we have, they usually only take into aspect one or two aspects of life. So like the social aspect, economical aspect, cultural aspect, scientific aspect. All those aspects can be brought together with new types of organizations. This is a very cool moment to live in history, because this means that if we make this transition, we have actually a world where everyone has a better chance to actually find their best, what I call the best self, because we all have different like skills, we all have different interests. And usually the problem with the current system is that it's hard for people to try and to experiment at the intersection of all the skills and interests that they have in a world which is more open, more community driven, and where you have organizations that are more holistic. You are able to actually find this sweet spot for you. So this is made possible thanks to a revolution in computation, which is decentralized computation. This is the canister, which is the basic fundamental unit. You can think of it as a smart contract, but it contains this WebAssembly module, which is the code, and the state, which is this WebAssembly memory. And this can be used for application, like OpenChat is an application that runs inside Canister. Dragons is a game that runs inside a Canister as well. And this fuels the whole decentralized work revolution, because now imagine that you have your personal Canister. So this Canister enables you to store your reputation, to store your wallet. So this is where we can already talk about the multi-chain aspect, because you can actually have a Canister that stores for you crypto from the Ethereum world, from Solana, Avax, other blockchains. This Canister can also store your files and your identity. And essentially, you can think of it as a representation of you, or at least your digital footprint in this decentralized environment. This Canister is always up. This is important. This Canister is decentralized. To some extent, we can debate that because it also depends on the protocol, ICP. And this Canister is able to store your data privately. And this is something that will come up a little bit later in 2024 or 2025. So that's why I put an asterisk here. It's still something that is not 100% on the mainnet right now. But in the future, it's already something that in theory is possible. So it will come out at some point. So now that you have your personal Canister, you essentially have a way to interact with the world that has never been possible before. You can interact with any other Canister with this, common interface, and you can make contract, you can make transaction, you can exchange value, you can sign agreements, and so that's where the DAO comes in. So this is my best representation of a DAO. Actually, it's more about the network than the governance. Usually, when I talk about DAO, sometimes people think about the voting system and the token and like how current DAO work, with where you have kind of people trying to get together on a decision. For me, DAO are really about network, and network are the most powerful concept in existence. Like all the big companies right now, Google, Facebook, Twitter, they are all essentially just a network. And a DAO is a network with some rules. So essentially, think about all the potential students from the Motoko Bootcamp here. There is student 1, there is student 2, student 3, student 4, student 5, and they all agree on specific rules on how they want to communicate, how they want to exchange value. And this makes it possible for them to directly, self-organize without necessarily having to go to a centralized place to coordinate. There is still a need at some points to essentially fix rules or to decide on specific protocols, on specific standards. So that's why I put this Motoko Bootcamp DAO Canister in the middle. But there is a whole space of experimentation for how this should be organized. And you can think that this network will be a sub-network inside another network, and you can combine essentially those DAOs all together. That's where you get organizational power, and you get the reduction of something that is called transactional cost. So transactional cost is actually the cost of doing businesses or operation with anyone. And it's the main reason that we had corporation in the previous years, because corporations are a way to reduce transactional costs, because you can essentially put people together and you can make them work in a structure without having any transactional cost, or at least reduced, because they are part of the same team. But with this technology, and I just want to come back here, you can think that the transactional cost in this network is basically almost zero. Transactions are instantaneous, they are verifiable, and they also are completely trustworthy, because we know that code is always going to run the way we are programming it. So that's extremely powerful. That's why I believe that DAOs are hubs for the next industrial revolution. That's where you can bring the capital with the technology and the talents. So essentially, imagine a bunch of entrepreneurs working on their dream job and able to self-organize. The capital is provided by the crypto revolution that is happening. So there is already capital that is floating on the internet at a speed that was never seen before. And it's just waiting to be used for something productive. And finally, the tech, of course, it's important. I put blockchain, but it's actually not the only thing that is important. There might be also other real world technologies like biotechnology. We can think about AI as well. I mean, we can talk about many technologies. So now I want to come back to crypto. All of this multi-chain is possible thanks to something called threshold ECDSA. So I'm talking about cryptography here, not cryptocurrency, even though it's related. So this private key here, which is the private key of your, let's say, wallet on Bitcoin, this private key is divided into shares that are in different nodes within the ICP protocol. And the important part is that this private key is never reconstructed. It's essentially shuffled around. And when you need a signature, you have to go through consensus, but you don't reconstruct the full private key. And so that's how you can have full multi-chain transaction. And that's something that is possible for threshold ECDSA, but it's also possible for other cryptographic scheme. And if you generalize that, you can do transactions across any blockchain network. In this scenario, this is what the multi-chain DApp looks like. You have, let's say, a contract on chain 1, a contract on chain 2, a contract on chain 3, and you can read this contract, you can sign this one, number 2, or deploy the number 3. Deployment is currently not something that is possible in practice. It's only possible in theory, but it's only a matter of implementing it, and then it will be possible. And you can use your DApp logic to trigger transactions with the states or deploy new contracts on any chain, mainly, I would say Ethereum, but any chain that is following this principle. So why would you want to do that? Well, for your users, the experience would be much better. For example, if you have a multi-chain application right now and you have something on Ethereum, something on Solana, something on Avax, your user actually has 3 different accounts and you need to bridge them with front end that people have to go through, they have to validate. And that can be not a super useful, interactive user experience. And so if you use the DApp will abstract that away for you. The user is in a much better position and is able to enjoy all the benefits of the chain. So they can actually, make a trade on this one, benefit from whatever opportunities available here, but with that being abstracted away for them. So one other thing is that you can also think that your DApp can cover the gas fees for the users. Of course, you need to have another way to monetize your application, but that's something you can take into account. And if you're ready to do that, for example, you can have, I found it super painful to sometimes bridge assets from different chains when I'm too familiar with the chain. I don't necessarily know where is the best DEXs and what is the tools that you have to use. And I would be ready to pay, a fee if someone can actually do all of this abstracted away for me. So that could be a business model here. So we always talk about the user, but I also wanted to talk about the builder experience. You will have to choose a chain if you're building a DAO or if you're building a dApp. You will have to choose I would say, a main chain. If your project is multi-chain, of course, you will expand, but you always have to choose a main chain. And choosing ICP means that you are essentially picking up, I would say, the best environment to build your multi-chain application. You have one language. So I put Motoko here, but it's not the only language. We have also Rust and TypeScript. So if you're already familiar, you don't necessarily have to learn that. One environment and one API. So you have your Canister, which provides this unified interface. And honestly, that's the best thing. Like that's really one of the biggest selling points is the easiness and once you speak that language and it's really familiar for you, it's super helpful and super appreciative experience for building. And that doesn't limit you to any specific chain because you can still interact with those other chains. The other way would be to go to Web 2, but actually it's much more complex to do those types of things on a Web 2 infrastructure than on a Web 3 infrastructure. It's even more complex to start because if you think about it, you will need a credit card, and to deploy on ICP, you don't necessarily need a credit card, you just need crypto. So that's even easier to deploy. So that's if you want to build a dApp, that was the, I would say, advantages that you have. But maybe you don't want to build a dApp and you want to go the full way. So you are convinced by the fact that DAOs are the best organizational structure, and you want to experiment. So you could also use ICP as a governance tool for your project, or a DAO built on ICP as a governance tool for your project. The advantages of doing that is that you have access to many features and you can hold many assets. So for example, this is your infrastructure. Let's say you have some canisters, you have some websites, you have some smart contracts. All of them can be put under the control of a DAO. So when I say DAO here, I mean in the sense of, actually I should maybe haven't put DAO here, but more like governance tool. So you have a canister that is a governance tool, and it can update your front end. It can update, deploys new smart contract for you. It can update other infrastructure that you have, or even receive income from it. And if you do that, you have access to a new space of possibilities regarding voting. You don't necessarily have to implement like token voting. You can do voting by role. That could be something interesting to explore. Or you could also do gas-free voting. I get mad when people still are paying gas for voting because that's like something you can avoid if you do it on ICP. You can also manage community platforms. Right now, that's not something I would recommend in production if you have important data, but in the future, assuming that your API keys could be private data, you could actually do that from a canister. So you could have a Twitter account that is managed by a DAO. And I think that has been a problem in the past. I've seen some hacks happen where some rogue member of a project takes over the control of those Web2 platforms because they are still under the control of someone, or at least some members of the team. And then it can promote like a scam project, or maybe leave a bad mark on the community. If you really want to build a community, then you will have all the tools will have to be managed somewhere on chain. And then, of course, you can think about how you want to organize your project, but that's another topic. So my recommendation is to build DAOs, and DAO the real way, and to do it on ICP. There is no second place to do it. If you want to talk about it anytime, I'm available. I would love to talk about that. And yeah, for the next few minutes, I thought about 3 different options. We could, option 1, do a quick Motoko workshop. I don't know what is the level, what is your Motoko level, or if you're even interested by Motoko, but we could do first Canister in Motoko. We could talk about more use cases, or we could talk about ICP as well. Like if you have questions about ICP, I'm pretty deep into the ecosystem. So usually it's good to talk about even the state of the ecosystem, some projects that could be interesting, and some challenges as well, because every ecosystem has challenges. So if you want to choose, we can start a pool.
Oh, we have split.
Yes, really split it. Okay.
Cool. But I think questions about ICP is the one which just edged out the other ones.
So drop your questions about ICP. I can answer everything, even the tough question.
Oh, we're back to 655. Let's give it a second or two more for people to vote, maybe. Cool. So, like, I think, Seb, that you'll have decided in the end what you want to do, because people seem to be pretty evenly split between the different options.
I have some questions. Okay, let's start with the questions.
Yeah, I think that's the best option as well. Cool. Omar, feel free to pop any question you have in the chat, and everybody else as well. We are open for, the floor is open for a discussion.
Let's see. Okay. Coming from the Ethereum ecosystem, that's a really interesting question. I'm interested in how you would compare user-owned Canister to smart wallet account abstraction. Yes, it's very related concept. So the difference is probably in the scale of it, like the performances of it. I haven't seen the same possibilities that you can have on ICP. If you have a user-owned Canister, you have, like, let's say 400 gigabytes of memory, so you can actually install application or even modules inside this. It can be like configurable to different ownership degrees. So you could have the user owning it, the user, but also some backup that could also own some specific canisters. But yes, it enables account abstraction. So account abstraction is essentially when I explained the fact that you had like different chains and different accounts and the dApps, that's what is account abstraction for ICP in the ICP world. And smart wallet, yeah, that creates a smart wallet. Essentially, if you have a user-owned Canister, you have a smart wallet. How smart it is depends on how complex the code for this Canister is. Okay, so I have seen another question. There seems to be criticism about ICP being locked at 4 gigabytes due to using WASM32. I think there is a proposal to move to WASM64. Is that true? Yes, it is coming in 2024. It's actually coming sooner than I was even expecting. I cannot give any exact date. I mean, that's like on Definity roadmap, but I know that it's coming. I've heard about it. And I think there are more information we could have a look. I don't want to say like a specific date, but I know it's coming like 2024. There is actually, even in the Motoko roadmap, so the Motoko language will actually abstract away. Right now you have like the stable memory and the heap. It will abstract away everything. So you have like one memory as a developer. And it will move to WASM64 at the same time. So you will have a kind of unbounded environment where you can build, unbounded to the limit of the subnet. So then it becomes the limit of the actual hardware that is running the Canister, but you have some room to grow here. Regarding storing private and public data with ICP, what would be the best way to do this for a scalable service? So the great thing about this aspect of having Canister is that you don't have to make all the data private, all the data public. You can actually have private data. So that's something that is needed for many businesses and organizations. At the same time, right now, the nodes that run ICP protocol can actually look at the data if they want to, in theory. They shouldn't be doing that, but we never know. But as I was saying in my presentation, there is private data coming up, and at some point it will not be possible. So that would make possible like use cases for sensitive data, like medical records, usually is the example that I take, or like identity credentials. I hope I answered your question. Okay, Omar, so how can a DAO make more efficient than a model of corporation with accumulation phase and profitable results? Yes, so that's a really good question. What would be the benefit for investors? It's a little bit different, I think, if in this model of DAO, like your investors could be your community itself. The problem with, so actually I was talking about that. Like if you're building a DAO, you're essentially building a network with token incentives. And you have two routes that you can go, and it's not like a 0 or 1. It's nuanced. Like you have different scale of that. But on one side, I would say you have the route where you raise external capital. So usually, like we say that like the VC route, you raise external capital, and that gives you a long shot at building something, like trying something in one direction. But then you are essentially evaluating something that is not out there, so it's more risky. And usually that's where you have when a token is released, you have a big dump, and that could be detrimental if you want to build like a community. You have the other way around, which is the meme coin way. Like for me, it's on the complete other scale, where you don't have any like product or anything, but you just wanna go with the social aspect of your project. So you just launch a meme coin. Unfortunately, most meme coins, they stop once they've made some profit, but it could actually be a good way to start a project. You start with the social component, build the community, and then you can build the utility and build the product. So I believe that if you can make your community win, you don't necessarily need, it depends on the project, of course. If you have something very speculative, it's hard to not raise external capital. But for the community, it would be actually more interesting to start from the bottom, because that gives you more upside. Like if you start with high capitalization, it's harder to grow with the community. So, but I believe in the end, it can be more efficient than a corporation because of the technology that we have, but that requires a lot of experimentation, a lot of new tools potentially, and new practices as well. And the benefit for capital would be to have access to some communities. I would say capital is like, if you say capital is actually a lot of different things. Like there is financial capital, but there is also social capital, there is technological capital, there is networking capital, there is cultural capital. So the benefit for financial capital could be to have access to the other capitals that the community can provide. Yes, that's a really tough question. So,
and it was a fun answer. Don't worry at all. Yeah, a couple more questions at the top, if you don't mind. One about ZK. Is ZK in the ICP roadmap? If so, what is considered?
Zero knowledge in the ICP roadmap? That's a great question. I don't think it's in the roadmap right now, but I also haven't had time to go into the they released a roadmap recently that you can take a look. I have quickly glanced at it because, of course, I saw it, but I haven't had time to deep dive. I really have it on my task list. So as far as I know, no, there is actually an interesting project that came up recently. It's called Nexus. And actually it's someone that was previously working at Definity. That is one of the chief scientists there. So I would definitely look at it. I think this is the kind of technology that could be integrated into the protocol at some point. But I don't think that zero knowledge is considered on the protocol right now. It might be considered on the developer side, like some builders are actually building infrastructure for it, but not at the protocol level yet. I see a question from Omar, how to adopt a free model of users to have personal canisters. So personal canister is not that expensive because you have $1 for deploying a canister. I believe this cost can be abstracted away for users, or at least like wrap in some kind of package where you deploy your personal canister for the first time, and it gives you a lot of benefit at the same time. So you are willing to spend that $1, or maybe that comes with like $10 to deploy it for the first time. One example is like, let's say it gives you like some kind of avatar. You enter into like a world, and then it gives you this avatar. So that would be like a way to deploy your canister. And for the user, it would look like joining a game. And there would be like a cost, but it would not necessarily be like, okay, I'm deploying my canister, and because most people are not necessarily willing to look at what is a personal canister, it will be abstracted away. It has to be abstracted away from mass adoption. But all the benefits that you get from it, like the user experience and potentially the income, because if these canisters become like your kind of way to gather income from Web3 application, that's something I didn't talk too much about, but you can imagine that your canister interacts with like other application, and this you receive income like regularly or every time you interact with some dApps, because that's Web3. Web3 is all about that. So if you have enough incentive for people to create their personal canister, I don't think the cost is a problem. And then, yes, there will need to be some kind of standards, especially regarding like how this user canister interacts with like dApp canister. How does it interact with maybe DAO canister? Because user canister is one thing, but you're necessarily going to have other type of canisters. Like, yeah, like I was saying, dApp canister is one.
Yeah, I think there's a new question from Matthias. Can you talk a bit about vet keys?
Okay, yeah, so vet keys. I'm not an expert in vet key, and there is already a testnet. It's not a live feature. It's like developer feature at the moment. I haven't used it, but I know that the testnet has already been out there. So right now, the vet key technology would enable you to essentially have a secret that is kept by a canister. So you would enable you like features like, for example, creating a DAO governed chat room that essentially you would be able to encrypt, and only the DAO would have access to it, or like some specific members would have access to it. But I don't want to talk about this without having developed something with vet keys. So yeah.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Do you have any other questions? Feel free to pop them in chat or in the questions tab. We'll take anything. In the meanwhile, while people come up with questions, where can people reach you, Seb? And where can they find out more about Motoko Bootcamp? Is it a community or a Discord server or Twitter profile where people can find out more about you? And
yes, I can drop some links in the chat. So yeah. Usually I'm very active on Twitter. You can drop me a DM. I will post my account. And then Motoko Bootcamp, the course is available in it's a we have both, like I'm doing bootcamp regularly, but also we have a self-paced course. So if people want to take it, it's available at motokobootcamp.com. I post the link in the chat.
Awesome. In the meanwhile, a new question has popped up. How do you think would be the best path for a DAO to hire an employee?
It's a different relation, because you don't necessarily have to hire people. If you think that like essentially every DAO member, if someone has like one token because he has interacted with the network in some way and provided some value, then it's already a DAO member. Of course, probably you want to have different types of members, and maybe you want to have those full-time members that are essentially kind of think of them as employees. But I think the best path is actually a more fluid path than what we have currently. Like right now, you basically reach out, hey, this is me, this is my background, and you don't necessarily have any experience with any interaction with the company prior. In a DAO, you can start by having multiple interaction, and maybe at some point you say, okay, this is what I've been doing in this network. Like, look at all the value that I've provided, and I would like to apply for a full-time role in this organization, and then you can get accepted. So I think that would be the natural path.
Yeah, makes complete and perfect sense. Any final questions, guys? While Seb is here, ready to answer, let's give it a minute to see if anybody will come up with anything. Yep, one more question. Do you see any legal or regulatory constraints that could impact the development of future DAOs?
Yes, for sure. That's not an easy question. So this is not something that is very like standard. So of course, those new organizations, they cause all sorts of questions. Usually, one problem that is frequent with DAOs right now is that if you don't define an organization, a government or a legal court can say that you are a partnership. So they call that a partnership because you don't define yourself, they define you. And so they apply rules that they could apply rules that don't necessarily apply to DAOs because that's like taking kind of a null system and applying to DAOs because they don't necessarily have a reference frame. So that could be a risk. And in those cases, you could have like members liable. You could have potentially some members that could be went to court or something. And there are actually a few regulatory frameworks that are starting to emerge. So one of them is called MiDAO. It's in the Marshall Islands, and they have actually passed a law in 2021 to give a legal existence to DAOs. So the Marshall Islands is known for actually having a regulation on ships that are not associated with any country. And they kind of apply the same model to DAOs because that's actually, DAO is not necessarily something that is located in one place in one country. Just like ship travel all around the globe, and they don't necessarily have one country of residency. So this is something to look. Thanks for the link. And yeah, there are also, like, I know there are also other frameworks in the United States. I think Europe is a bit behind on that. But in the United States, you have like the Wyoming state that put together a regulation on DAO. So I would definitely recommend you to look at those things before doing like your DAO. But I have something that I want to say is that you can have a community and you don't need to, as long as you don't have any money involved, you can play like for a long time. That's also an easy, like a good way to experiment. Of course, it only becomes serious and real when the money is involved. But it's like all the technology aspects, you can play with technology, you can play with the community. As long as you don't involve money, usually you don't risk too much.
Yeah, it's always been like that, hasn't it? Like, at least like as long as there's no money, like you say, money creates problems, right? Okay, if there are no more questions, and I don't see any, I'll give you a sec to pop any file questions in the chat or in the questions tab if you have some. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and for asking all of these wonderful questions. Thank you, Seb, as well, for coming in for the wonderful workshop on DAOs and the ICP. And I think this is a very fitting session for the end of the Educate series, because it started about being about multi-chain DAOs, but it expanded into being a lot more. So I think it's a very fitting finale for all of it. For everybody else, although this is the end of the Educate series that we have been running for the past 4 weeks, this is definitely not the end of our current collaboration with the Definity team on the ICP and Chain Fusion. This is the end of the Educate series, like I said, but a hackathon is launching in a couple of weeks, to be specific, on the 8th of July. So make sure to apply for that if you haven't yet, to build cool projects for the IC. Any final words, Seb, for the audience?
Yes, we are starting the Open Internet Summer in 2 days, so on Saturday, and we will talk about DAOs, ICP, exploring business models and what's possible to build on ICP. So invite everyone to join us, of course, and it's actually very compatible with the Encode ICP Chain Fusion Hackathon. You could take some advance, like to arrive there with already some projects. So yeah, feel free to join the Open Internet Summer.
There you go. Perfect, a perfect fit. Cool. So thank you, Seb, once again. Thank you for everybody for coming, and see ya at the hackathon launch on the 8th of July.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, Encode, and see you everyone. Bye.
Bye.